The Zelda franchise has been around for over 30 years, and with every single one we've had a new experience and a new adventure. So here's the history of The Legend of Zelda. Also, as a disclaimer, I'm only going to be focusing on the console ones, not the Game Boy and DS ones, because then this video would be way too long. So enjoy! As a child, Miyamoto would explore the forest around him in his hometown Sonobe, Japan. The most memorable part of this journey was when he discovered a cave. He would always view this cave from a distance and would never actually enter it. Eventually though, he grew enough guts, and also he brought a lantern with him and started exploring the cave. This inspired him greatly when he was making Zelda. There seems to be a lot of similarities to Peter Pan and Link. This could be because Miyamoto drew some inspiration from Peter Pan because Miyamoto's a big fan of Walt Disney movies. The name Zelda originates from F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife named Zelda. Miyamoto said the name sounded pleasant and significant. There were plans for the player to have the ability to time travel, but it never came through. The composer for the Zelda soundtrack wanted for the main theme to be from Maurice Ravel's Bolero, but the song was still under copyright. Some articles suggest that the Famicom's disk system, which was a floppy disk add-on for the Famicom, would give players the ability to make their own dungeons, but the idea was scratched. The manual for The Legend of Zelda states the use of a microphone, which of course confused United States users. This is because the Famicom had a microphone on the controller. The Legend of Zelda would release on February 21st of 1986, and would become the first NES game to surpass 1 million sales, in total selling 6.5 million copies. Miyamoto wanted to make a spin-off to Zelda. A totally fresh team was tasked at making the game, but Miyamoto remained at his position as producer. Later on though, it was decided that it would become a sequel to Zelda. It first released exclusively on the Famicom's disk system before a worldwide release. A famous joke to find inside the game is a character who calls himself Error, but you can also find a character named Bagu. This is Japanese for bug. The laugh you hear from Ganon on the game over screen is actually a laugh from the character Soda Popkinski in Super Punch-Out! In the Japanese version of Zelda 2, there's a grave in the Sierra town that reads, "Hero Loto rests here." Loto, who is from Dragon Quest. Before Ocarina of Time, Nintendo actually experimented with making a polygon-shaped Zelda remake of Zelda 2 for the SNES, but the technology was still limited, so the idea was scratched. The Adventures of Link would be released in 1987. It wasn't really considered by many to be the favorite of the family. Zelda 2 would release on January 14th of 1987 and would sell over 4.3 million copies. A year after Zelda 2, work on a new one already started. This one was fairly bigger, and the SNES cartridges usually had 512 kilobytes of space. A Link to the Past though had 1024, which equaled 1 megabyte. But still, to save some space, the color depth was limited to 8 colors instead of 16. Miyamoto had plans for the game to have 3 individual characters with their own abilities. We always see people doing speedruns of Nintendo games, and it seems to take hours for some. But for A Link to the Past, it can only take around 3 minutes. This is because there are certain areas in the game where the player can walk through walls and enter the last room. The catfish that you can see in the Swamp of Evil is based on a Japanese tale about a catfish named Namazu. The fish wiggles its body and causes destruction to the surrounding land. A Link to the Past is the first Zelda game that reveals the Master Sword. The Master Sword gets its inspiration from King Arthur's famous sword Excalibur, which can only be taken out by the Chosen One. A Link to the Past released on November 19th of 1991 and has sold over 4.6 million copies. Ocarina of Time was planned to be released for the N64's disk drive, the 64DD, but eventually was changed to being a cartridge after the realization that it needed a higher performance. The game's size was 32 megabytes. During this time, of course, everyone who was working on the game was still new to the 3D technology, and the development of Ocarina of Time was right next to Mario 64. Miyamoto wanted for Ocarina of Time to be played in first person, but it was scrapped after Link was to be a child as well, and Miyamoto needed for the viewer to see this. Compared to Mario 64's camera being controlled by the player, the camera moves by itself in Ocarina of Time, stating that the camera is intended to reflect a focus on the game's world. The cutscenes are not generated animations for a good reason. The developer of the cutscenes, Takumi Kawago, said his top priority was to make the player feel in control of the action, and that's definitely hard when you see a really good rendering of something, then it cuts back to something that looks half as good. There were updated versions of the game, including one changing music in the Fire Temple because it had Islamic chants in the music. Of course, this was removed because Nintendo has a big no-no policy for religious beliefs in their games. As it's known, Ocarina of Time had a fishing minigame, but the only reason that it exists is because Kazuki Morita, a team member, got sidetracked. He was supposed to be working on designs for the bosses, but got inspired while creating Morpha, who was a water temple boss. He added fish into the temple, and then it went off from there. Ocarina of Time would release on November 21st of 1998 and has sold 7.6 million copies. Some believe that Majora's Mask was created due to a lack of enthusiasm for Yura Zelda. The video game Japanese magazine Famitsu revealed that an expansion to Ocarina would come to the 64DD. The project was dubbed Yura Zelda, which translates to Another Zelda. During one of Nintendo's Iwata Asks, Eiji Aonuma said that he made a deal with Miyamoto. If he could make a new Zelda game within a year, then he wouldn't have to do Yura Zelda. In Aonuma's own words, he said, "The person in charge of the dungeon design making alternative versions of the game's dungeons didn't seem very progressive. I didn't think we'd be able to call the finished result a new Zelda game. However, I couldn't just say no to the idea of making a new one. To that end, I made a bargain with Miyamoto. If I could make a new Zelda game within a year, we wouldn't have to do Yura Zelda." But of course, we know Yura Zelda is now basically Master Quest, and it can only be found as a bonus disc on Winwaker and also on the 3DS. Nintendo revealed that it would be called Zelda Gaiden, or in English, Zelda Side Story, which would be playable at the 1999 Nintendo Space World. At first, it was believed that Zelda Yura and Zelda Gaiden were the same thing, but Miyamoto later confirmed that this was not the case. In March of 2000, the title for Zelda would be finally revealed. Majora's Mask was so powerful that it actually needed an extra 4MB of RAM. The expansion pack is important to ensure accurate dynamic lighting, more detail in the textures, and better animation. The extra memory was also used for the NPC's interactions. In the Astral Observatory, there is an Easter egg for the unannounced GameCube in the depiction of a dolphin. This is significant because the name of the project for the GameCube was Project Dolphin. There is a very huge resemblance to the salesman Happy and Shigeru Miyamoto, as they both have similar morals. The salesman Happy wants to sell masks to people and bring them joy, similar to Miyamoto's belief of making games and experiences to make people smile. He also happens to have a Mario mask. Majora's Mask would release on April 27th of 2000 and would sell over 3.3 million copies. Plans for Winwaker went underway even before Majora's Mask's completion. A small concept video was made for the Nintendo 2000 Space World Expo during the announcement of the GameCube, although the team actually disliked this demo video and wanted to change the style of the game. One of the team members, Yoshiki Haruhana, thought up a cartoon design of Link. A design manager named Satoru Takizawa drew a moblin in a similar style. They eventually agreed for the next Zelda to be a more cartoonish style. At the final ever Nintendo Space World in 2001, a new video demo was presented, but it came with mixed thoughts as some people liked the new design and some were displeased with it, hoping to be a more realistic Zelda game design, even getting the nickname Zelda with a C. So there are some out there that may be too young to remember what this whole thing was with Zelda Zelda, and basically what Zelda is referring to Wind Waker being cel shaded. And if you don't know the difference between cel shading and something else, here's an example. Basically at this time for some reason people didn't like that it was cel shaded. It was mostly because people wanted to see how realistic the Zelda graphics could get. So it kind of felt like a letdown to some people that it was going to be cel shaded. Miyamoto's response to this was to restrict any more information about Wind Waker until a demo was possible. A year later at E3 2002, Nintendo had a playable demo of Wind Waker. Later that year, Nintendo revealed that the Japanese version of the game was called Kaznotaku or Wind Baton, and of course here in the United States we know it as Wind Waker. It would be released on December 13th of 2002. The sound you hear from the Kuz is not as mystical as you think. It's actually a recording of two Japanese men arguing but in reverse and sped up. The man says, "At least I'm not balding, and looking like you are, people will think you're a monster." Wind Waker would release on March 24th of 2003 and has sold well over 4,430,000 copies. Only a few months after Wind Waker in 2003, Nintendo already revealed another Zelda game in development. Eiji Aonuma said that first they were planning on making a sequel to Wind Waker, but many people wanted an Ocarina-style game. Eiji then approached Miyamoto with this and gave his 2 cents into the idea of making a realistic Zelda game that would appeal to the United States. At first Miyamoto was hesitant, but later on went with it, suggesting that the game should also have a mechanic never seen in Ocarina of Time, being horseback combat. With this, at E3 2004, Nintendo showed a trailer for the game. Some had the impression that the Wind Waker engine was used to make Twilight Princess because there's a file in the game named item D1.arc. It contains 21 different items from Wind Waker. Twilight Princess would be released on both the GameCube and Nintendo's new console, the Wii. But before this, it concerned Aonuma that putting the game on 2 systems wouldn't be a good idea. But then CEO Satoru Iwata believed that it would be a good idea, and it would satisfy both consumers of the GameCube as much as the Wii. Of course, it was really easy to simply move the GameCube version to the Wii because the Wii is backwards compatible. To show off the Wii's motion control, Nintendo wanted to implement a sword-swinging gesture for Link in first person. Eiji though saw this as rather confusing because Link is left-handed and it would be really unnatural for people who are right-handed to swing their controller while Link swings it with his left arm. So the idea was scrapped. And in 2006, Twilight Princess would release. Twilight Princess would release on November 19th of 2006, and it would sell over 8,850,000 copies. Right after Twilight Princess's release, the team already began discussing another Zelda game. Eiji Aonuma was curious to see if Zelda's franchise could continue with the steps of Twilight Princess or not. It eventually came to the team that they should follow Twilight Princess, as they believed that they still didn't create a more realistic world. The budget for Skyward Sword was quite high, and it was only supposed to take 3 years, but instead took 5, making it the longest developed Zelda game. Early concept art showed that the floating islands known as Skyloft is based off the real-life island Le Mont Saint-Michel, located in France. Zelda's lullaby can be heard when playing Ballad of Goddess backwards. In 2008, rumors began floating around that there would be a new Zelda game, and at E3, Miyamoto did confirm that a new Zelda game was in the works. Next year at E3, there would be no new title or gameplay, but instead there would be Art of Link and Fi. Miyamoto said that there would be further information next year, and at E3 2010 would be the time when Skyward Sword's title would be revealed and the trailer, and of course Wii Motion Plus would actually be used for Link's sword this time. The game would be released later in November of 2011, but following the release there was a nasty glitch found that could corrupt save game files. This caused a huge issue for Nintendo and caused them to create instructions about how to avoid this glitch, and they even offered manual repair. Skyward Sword would release on November 18th of 2011 and would sell over 3,670,000 copies. So for a while, Nintendo had been receiving comments from fans wishing for a Zelda game that was more open world and had an interconnected map. So Nintendo finally wanted to try this out, and they took some influence from Skyrim and other such games. The developers made a concept of Breath of the Wild in the original Zelda. Originally, Breath of the Wild was going to be a Wii U exclusive and it was going to be released in 2015, but it was delayed later into 2016 after developers wanted to add more gameplay options. And with the Nintendo Switch underway, the game was pushed to be a day one release right next to the Switch in 2017. You know how sometimes it's tough to climb a mountain and it's gonna take some drastic strategic assumptions to see if you'll make it? Well, that wouldn't have actually happened if it wasn't for Miyamoto. The team at first actually made a mechanic that caused climbing to become a little bit easier. The player had the ability to stab their sword into the rock, or whatever they were on, but Miyamoto did not approve of this. He found it awfully strange, saying that you can't stand on the tip of a sword. But then the team tried to explain that you stab the sword into the rock and then you just hang there. But he was like, no, that's still not gonna work. Don't do it. When you first start the game and run out of the cave into the beautiful world that's presented, this has a very interesting similarity to one of the photos in the instruction manual for the original game. There's even speculation that there's a tribute to Satoru Iwata inside of the game. If you approach the traveler Botrick, he will direct you to the Satori Mountain. From a distance, this mountain actually glows at random periods of time. If you approach the glowing mountain, you'll find a beast that's referred to as the Lord of the Mountain, or as Satori. With the way Botrick looks and the name of the mountain, I have no doubt that this is a nod to our previous Nintendo president. Breath of the Wild was released on March 3rd of 2017 and was met with huge success and has sold well over 10 million copies. There's definitely something very special about the Zelda franchise. Not just that it has a confusing timeline, but also that it's a very deep game. Instead of thinking about what type of game would make him the most money, it seems like Miyamoto drew his ideas from childhood. He's done this a lot with other games, but it seems like Zelda shines the most in this. He didn't just focus on the theme of the game, but he also focused on the music, the visuals, and of course the gameplay itself. There's just something unique about doing it in Zelda. With every game combined, the Legend of Zelda franchise has sold well over 105 million games. We've come such a long way, and I can't wait to see where Link will go on his next adventure.